Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home. And first, we're going to start with the mini personalities of Miss Jana S Brown.
I have to finish cleaning off my glasses first because I can't see my many personalities. Hi, I'm Jana S Brown. I also write under the pen name Jena Rey. I write science fiction. I write fantasy. I write urban fantasy. I write the weird and the wonderful, often with smoochies, including space westerns. So this is going to be fun.
All right, weird and wonderful is good, and the many personalities. We're glad you're seeking treatment. That's a good thing. And next we have Mr. J.R. Wise, first time on the show.
Yep. Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm a veteran of the Marine Corps and the Army. I finally stopped eating crayons. Tried to write something with them. Put a book out earlier, and writing some more.
Ah, Fricky Stanley. So when you were in, was the crown joke actually a thing? Because that came out after I was discharged. Like we called you jarheads and gyrenes when I was in.
I really didn't get hit with the crayon thing too much until I switched over to the Army.
When was that?
2013.
Okay. So when did you go into the Marine Corps?
2007.
Oh, dude, I was already getting medvaced and retired. All right. All right. Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I was part of the cohort that got the great suckering when 1998 CNN did a special that world peace might finally be attainable. And that's the month I enlisted. I remember vividly because I was laughing. My my recruiter told us that the Reserve and National Guard would only get called up after the Ladies Auxiliary, but before the Boy Scouts. That's sucker. Right? I mean, I was a military brat, so I didn't believe it, but the irony of that and the CNN and world peace thing, and then 9/11 and everything that followed, it always amuses me. All right, next we have Mr. Jesse James Fain, outlaw author himself.
Hey everybody, I am Jesse James Fain. As JR likes to point out, I do go by the outlaw author on occasion. I write military sci-fi, military fantasy, urban fantasy, anything I can squeeze a gunfight, a sword fight, or a fist fight into. Spend a lot of time in the dojo, in the gym, and on the gun range, and I try and work that into the works that I do on the fictional page.
Our lawyer did advise us we do have to make this announcement, dear listener. Mr. Jesse James Fain, while he calls himself outlaw author, his warrants have since been released. He is no longer wanted by authorities, and you have no reason to look for him. Just so we put that out. He's clear now.
Nothing active in this country.
That's right.
Yeah,
there we go.
I don't have any U.S. warrants.
Exactly. We don't care about them other countries.
Yeah. It's all crimes against humanity in other nations, but they're all soft.
Look, it's not a war crime the first time, all right? That's all I got to say.
Look,
never is.
All I got to say is Sealand can go to hell.
All right, next we have Mr. Michael LaVoice.
Hey, Michael LaVoice, author of the Galaxy's Most Wanted series and the soon-to-be-released Gladius League series. Currently working on a Space Navy series with New Zealand's own Peter Stanley. I write military science fiction, space opera, and occasionally dabble in fantasy. You can find me on the webs at Amazon.com and, of course, my website, michaellovejoy.com.
Are you housebreaking Peter Stanley? Because, we've got to understand the concept of time zones. I can't tell you, Nick complains about me messaging him at 1 his time. I'll get 4 o'clock in the morning, my time, just random messenger calls from Peter.
I know, right? He doesn't even text you first. He just hits that call button, and all the thing you're rolling over, and you got video call ringing in from Messenger. Just dude, I'm sleeping. Go away.
About fair play, JR.
Yeah, right. It's okay. It's karma. I get it. But
one time I answered, I was in the bathroom. I was like, "I'm on the bog, mate. Stop it."
Nice.
All right. So the next part. Well, I mean, he'll learn eventually or not. He'll become immune to, things that we say. But all right, so with that out of the way, the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them. So obviously, you know that we found Jesse, Michael, and Jana through Three Ravens, and I found JR wandering around in the JR fields over on Twitter. Somebody tagged the podcast because he's a new author, got his first book out. They were just surprised Marine knew how to read. So I'm like, oh, we got to get him on the show. We've got a solo interview that we scheduled already on the books for January. We're actually recording this one just, the week before Thanksgiving. But I said, let's get him out there before then, because maybe you'll buy his book and make his Christmas really nice. Those crowns aren't going to buy themselves. That's what I'm saying, right? Like, he needs a little bit of help. So buy his first book, help a brother out. And with that,
wait now, hold on. In the pre-show, he said he transitioned from Marine Corps to Army, so he no longer eats crayons. So let's be fair.
That's where I learned to write with them.
Yeah.
There we go.
So what did you do in the Marine Corps?
I was infantry.
All right,
in the Army too.
How freaking standing.
Attaboy.
So the Brotherhood of the Blue Cord. I like it. All right. So then we can't really offend him, Nick. We're good then. All right.
But don't put that challenge at my feet, man.
Hey.
It'll
Keep it
get
safe for
weird
work.
fast.
All right, we got to wait for like 10 minutes before we drop the F-bombs and stuff. All right, so with that out of the way, are you ready for the religion questions? Because this is your first time on the show, so you do have to answer them, JR.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, there are wrong answers, just so you've been warned. With that, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Firefly.
All right, go on. Why? What is it about Firefly that you dig?
Well, it's really fitting for this episode since it's a space western, but also I think Mal Reynolds is one of the best written characters of all time. He really is. And I sympathize with him. He lost his war. I lost my war. So, I hadn't lost it by the time I saw it, but I think we all kind of knew it was going that way because I saw it kind of late. I didn't see it when it first came out.
Okay, that's fair. We were still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when Nick and I invaded. Happens. All right, so because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Probably Game of Thrones. I just like I like anything that's grim dark, honestly, like that Warhammer 40K, anything like that.
Yeah, there we go with 40K.
All right, so who had the better outfits, Game of Thrones or Firefly? Because I'm digging the brown coat, man. That trench coat, it's like shades of Columbine meets space western.
Damn. I got dark.
Well, you
Firefly.
said you like grim dark. I'm just trying to speak your language.
Yeah, that's true. I think Firefly had the better outfits.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
They had
that's
the
fair.
fluffy dress. It's all about the fluffy dress, man.
And the mechanic, enough said. If you know, you know.
Come on,
Yep.
Jana.
Yep.
You know he was a big Cat in Tight Pants fan. Come on.
Oh, darn
Just say
straight. Captain Tight
Okay.
Pants is great, And, Jane had his moments, so I can't argue with any
Most of
the
those were in his bunk.
characters there.
But that I'll Be in My Bunk gave some of the best memes ever. And it's
Oh,
just the
exactly.
best reply. So, and the character that played him was in the one show where the guy was working at like a geek Chuck, yeah. And
Yeah,
he was
Chuck.
like, he was the special agent that was like worshiping Reagan. He was basically Jane
young
all over
Stroll.
again with different clothing.
I
It was
spent that whole
hilarious.
series waiting for him to say he was going to be in his bunk, and he didn't do it. Not once.
I know, I did too. It was an excellent show though. So all right. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is when we grow up, people stop asking us the important questions, JR. So what's your favorite dinosaur?
This is going to be such a basic answer, but I'm going to give the same answer I would have when I was 5, and that's Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's fair.
Legit.
All right. And then finally, because we are affiliate sponsors of the Coffee Brand Coffee Company, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Tea, I prefer chai tea with a little bit of milk and some stevia.
Nice.
Wait, are you sure you're American?
And everyone in the audience that's
Hey,
an Indian said
Turkey's
he
good.
just said tea twice.
I know, that's true. Chai is just the word for tea. Yeah. So just chai, little milk. Yeah.
I work at St. Jude, and there are a lot of folks of Indian descent there, and they just get the big giggles whenever somebody says chai tea.
Yeah.
It's great.
I have worked with some Indian individuals who also have told me that joke, and they always giggled. So I get you.
kind of like a bow staff.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
so how did you get
Exactly.
into how did you get into chai as opposed to like coffee? Because I feel like America is more of a coffee culture than tea.
I just never developed a taste for coffee. And then actually in Afghanistan is where I started drinking chai, because every time we went to a key leader engagement, they'd offer us chai, and I just really liked it.
I pretended to drink the chai, and then I would drink the coffee when they weren't looking. So
I actually drank it.
we are not the same, clearly. All right. But yeah, no, chai's cool. I dig it. I mean, it smells good. I wish I liked the flavor, but I mean, it smells good, and it looks green, so you can pretend you're like being healthy and stuff.
Yeah.
Does that count as vegetables? Jana, you're a mother out there, so you got the mom voice. Let's think about this. Can we call that vegetables because it's green? And your mother does tell you to eat your greens. The tea is green, so.
Well, it's green and it's a plant. So you're drinking your vegetables at that point. You are pulling certain essential oils. So yeah, you can make an argument for it.
She'll allow it, Nick. We won once.
I'll allow it. It's true.
Is that the same as drinking your breakfast, though? Is that no? Okay. All right.
No.
When I was in the Army, we were also drinking our sustenance. Like I used to drink potatoes like it was going out of style.
That's called vodka, JR.
Potato. All right. With that out of the way. So how did you get into speculative fiction, JR? We're going to pick your brain for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Grill him.
Actually, it was an assignment from my counselor when I was trying to work through some of the stuff that happened in Afghanistan. She told me to write it. Yeah.
Writing is therapy at the VA. That's me too.
Yeah. And it was funny because she told me to write it down exactly as it happened, and I absolutely couldn't. And she's like, well, why don't you write it like science fiction or something so you can like think about it without thinking about it. And then it was a lot easier if there were like aliens or if it was 400 years in the future or something like that.
Okay. And I notice you've got what looks like the Halo rifle behind you. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah. I'm a big cosplay nerd.
Nick already likes you. He's a cosplay dude.
Yeah. Stay up there. Yeah, built a whole suit of ODST armor to go with it.
Oh, sweet.
Nice. So this is going to air in January. So if they sign up for your newsletter on your website in January, will you show them that armor in your February newsletter?
Yes.
There you go. You want to see this armor, sign up for his newsletter. Show notes, links there. Hook them up. And in February, we will all get the big reveal. All right. So what is it about Halo that you like?
I mean, I was 12, 13 when it came out. So just everybody was playing it. And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the more recent games. Like 4 was okay. 5 was trash. I liked what they tried to do with Infinite. I just don't think they pulled it off well. But I mean, the original was just, it was the best shooter at the time. Like there had been nothing else like it. And, it was this really big, expansive universe. Most of the books are really good. It's just got a very deep lore. And I like how they've tried to humanize the Chief.
I dig it too. I like that he wasn't made for the aliens. Like he was created to solve the insurrectionist problem, and they just happened to coincidentally be completing that project right as the aliens decided to show up. And happenstance happens. I mean, some of the historic battles in the world happen because armies stumbled onto each other accidentally. So I dig it. All right. So what do you think about the Warthog? Are you the only one who thinks it makes no sense that the thing drives that way?
Yeah, I mean, even in the original game, it was so hard to learn to drive that thing. I felt like I spent more time flipping it over than actually shooting guys with it.
I killed more of the Marine support troops flipping them over on accident trying to drive that dang thing. And then if you let them drive it and you get behind the gun, they crash you even worse. Like they're worse than you are. And in theory, they're subject matter experts.
You would think, but no. They could shoot that gun good, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you got the one, I can't remember the guy's name, the staff sergeant, gunny sergeant, the black guy with the cigar and the mustache.
Sarge.
Johnson.
Sergeant Johnson, but he's just Sarge.
Like, he's like everybody's, inner Arlie Emery kind of thing going on. That Full Metal Jacket vibe I was digging. So, I know the guys here have all tried it, but what about you, Jana? Have you gotten into the Halo? Are you a gamer in that respect, or you keep it tabletop?
Okay, so now I'm going to date myself because it was my sons who were playing Halo, and I provided the snacks and the commentary.
Hell yeah,
Because
Mom.
The
Those are important.
first-person shooter point of view screws up my brain. I end up giving myself motion sickness. So yes, I was always a part of it, but it was mostly, listening to them, pointing out things that didn't make any sense whatsoever, and providing the snacks.
So were you the mom in the corner, but like, oh, don't do that. He looks so cute. Why'd you have to kill him?
No, I was the mom in the corner going, shoot that one. The guy right there, the one that's going to boom.
I had a friend of mine's mom was like,
you would not be dead.
His mom was like a peacenik, beatnik, hippie type, and like every time we'd play Halo, she'd be like, "Can't you just like make peace with them?" And like they're genocidal, they want to kill us.
No. I'm the one that wants to play. There's a Legend of Zelda game that my daughter has, and there's the one that's the beautiful world, and she wanders around and she picks the flowers and all that kind of stuff. I like the one that is the Hyrule Warriors, where we just wander around and we destroy everything. If you encounter it, bash all of the fight stuff buttons and kill it all. That's the one that I like, is the one that all I have to do is think about, go that away, and if it gets in my way, kill it. And I'm good with this kind of gameplay.
I like it.
I was about to say full murder hobo right there.
I can appreciate
I do for video games. I like playing healers tabletop, but when it comes to video games, I'm a murder hobo.
I gotta admit, I never played Halo. My last video game that I seriously played was MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries. That's how old I am. So yeah, it's been a minute since I was really into a game.
When I was in college,
my husband's doing the new clans thing, and the new old clans thing, and my house is all big stompy robots right now.
Yeah.
I played LAN parties when I was in college, and we'd be all run out into the middle of the area, but like, you SOB, we'd cuss out whoever got us, and then you're always trying to be the first one back to be the camper. As much as you like make fun of the guy that's camping and sniping, you want to be the one to get all the kills that way. So that was always
charting is fun.
That's right.
I called it RDing. I would camp somewhere. Oh, okay, I got enough kills. Move to another location, camp there. Go to my next KOA.
I've watched this guy on YouTube, Grandpa Gaming, who takes it to the next level. Like, he's a former Army sniper, and he uses his actual skills on the first-person shooters now.
He's like, not an Army sniper. He just did the unsubscribed podcast. He was a Navy rescue diver.
I just assumed he was a sniper because he's the way he talked about.
He just shoots all the time. He grew up shooting. His grandfather was like a World War II triple ace, flying P-51s. His dad was in the Navy. His dad and him were both in Vietnam in theater at the same time. It was nuts, man. But yeah, he just grew up shooting. He knows how to shoot very well, and he just transferred those skills to the video game world. He's been playing video games since they were basically invented. So
I like watching him giggle as he's like slaughtering all these kids who are trying to talk tough, and he's just laughing hysterically as he's like.
I want to see him go up against a kid that uses the voice modulator to make himself sound like 9 years old on Fortnite. Have you seen that guy? I want to see those two take each other on. That would be a blast.
The funny thing is if you had asked me before my own deployment about families meeting in country like that, I'd be like, oh, come on, the odds of that happening. But I met 3 of my cousins and my uncle when I was in Iraq. We met up at Al-Taqundam. I'm like, hey, I know you. What are you doing here? It was weird.
When I was in Saudi for Desert Storm, we got to just outside of Kuwait. And I was on what they called the RSOP team, and that was the team that went in, cleared the area of any enemy, and then set the markers down for where they were going to put the missile launchers and everything. I was in an air defense artillery unit, JR. That explains that. So we had one guy on our unit, RSOP team, who's David Blashoy. Guy was just certifiable, just insane nuts. I loved every second that I spent.
All the best ones are.
Hilarious. Yeah. So he sent his mom a letter saying he was on the RSOP team, and it was a secret deployed team who was going to go assassinate Saddam Hussein. Freaking out. His dad is a command sergeant major. Just all of a sudden, this command sergeant major rolls up into our attack site outside of Kuwait. I want to see Specialist Bashoy right the hell now. Dad, he's yelling at him. He dropped him in front of the entire platoon. It was great.
That is awesome.
It was so much fun.
We saw the opposite. We saw a couple of guys that military families like that where colonels and whatever were coming to their enlisted sons and be like, hey, Your mother called. Write her a freaking letter right now. We saw a few of those, but not the opposite. I can't imagine like why you would do. That's just insane. Like, was he trying to lie or was he just joking?
Him. You know, he and his girlfriend they were in the same platoon and they got secretly married before we deployed. And so they were serving in the same platoon deployed. One night, my lieutenant's walking past the shower. He's like, knock, knock, knock. Anybody in there? Oh, yes, sir. PFC. Stephanie. Oh, okay. I'll be back. And then as he's walking away, Blashoy's in there with her and he goes, yeah, see you later, sir. Oh, dude.
Kid has no riz.
And the lieutenant was like getting mad at everybody because we were a co-ed unit. And he's like, no fornicating in the field. And Blashoy just like starts to walk away. Where are you going? It's not fornicating, sir. We're married. And he just kept on walking.
Wow.
Oh,
that's a loophole.
I
They
mean,
exploited it.
that's something else. I mean, one of the rules when we were in there, because I was there 03 and then again in 05, and they had General Rule 1 Alpha about fraternization. We'll use the family-friendly term amongst the troops. And so if you were ever caught in Arif John, which was in Kuwait, they would stick us on roving patrols. And in theory, we call it the roving SMEX patrol, because in theory, we're supposed to catch people, but that's a lot of paperwork if you actually catch them. So we bring like our NVGs and our camera, and we were like, we're filming this and sending it to your wife, or you can disperse, and I didn't see you, and I'll delete the video because I don't want to do the paperwork. And most of the time they'd run. The joke was we never actually had batteries in the thing because we were using the batteries for our MP3 players and you know, CD mans and stuff.
Important electronics of war, yeah.
Right. I mean, like, if you needed to get a video, you'd move the batteries around, but like, you know, that just wasn't as important, the camera, when we were in the rear. So so when you were with your deployments there, you were at Afghanistan both times, or did you do both?
Never went to Iraq. I went to Afghanistan, bounced around a whole bunch of other places. A couple of my 7 deployments were essentially taxpayer-funded vacations. I'm not going to lie.
Well, they do shorter deployments, Michael. The Marines are doing 6 months, right?
Yeah, 6 months.
That's what ours was. I mean, gosh.
Ours was a year.
Desert Shield and Storm was like a 6-month field problem with live ammo. That's all it was.
My first one was a year. My second one was 14 months. So
I only deployed once with the Army, and that was a year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They should have taken notes from the Marine Corps and given us shorter tours, but, you know, that would have actually improved troop morale. So, of course, they never did that.
No, they should have taken notes from the Air Force. Like 90 days.
90 days?
90 days.
How did they do that? Like, the Air Force that relieved us were 6-month rotations.
The ones I met, they were there for 90 days unless they were in some, you know, high-speed unit.
We got to corrupt the Air Force, though. We taught them about the Army infantry tactic we call malicious compliance.
Yep.
They wanted us to count, like in the Army, like every time the round goes in the barrel, it's fouled. You never put it back in, so you just toss it in the clearing barrels or whatever. The Air Force wanted us to account for everything, and like, who's got time for that? So when they wanted that, we're like, we got to go right back, and we went to the berm and we just emptied every single round. We just fired everything. We made lots of friends, though, because all the ones that wanted to fire all the guns they never got to were like, here, take a shot. We went through basic combat load 3 times over for every troop. It was fun. So they never asked for an exact count of the rounds again, I'm told. So anyway, all right. So we're going to air that beautiful commercial. We're going to thank the sponsor today, and then we're going to dive right into Space Westerns before we put Jana to sleep talking about, you know, boy stuff. Try to hang in.
Sons, I'm good.
Okay.
When a young officer no longer wants to be an instrument of destruction, sacrifices are a necessary part of leadership. Get used to having blood on your hands, and whose job is to help a warlord annihilate humankind. I will unleash this bioweapon on the galaxy, but first, I need to control her. He plays a dangerous game to escape to the warlord's greatest rival.
Hundreds of people loved her. They gave their lives for her, and she will never know.
Discover a galaxy with epic space battles, tangled loyalties, and the pursuit of freedom, sacrifice, and redemption. The Handler's Gambit by Ingrid Moon. Available wherever books are sold. And check for the audiobook, coming soon.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. Now that we got that over, we're going to talk about all the cool things. So, first off, what is it you think that makes, we're going to, obviously we're talking space Westerns. So what is it you think that makes the intersection of the old spaghetti Western, the Western sort of story work so well in space? That's the first open-ended question we're going to cover. And anybody feel free to jump in as you got answers.
It's a frontier thing. Space is full of vast empty rocks. If you go to the largest, nearest planet to our own, if you get a decent telescope, you can see it. It's a big desert for a lot of it. Mars looks like the middle of the Mojave in a lot of places. And so they just pair naturally from what we can observe in our environment. And when you take those frontier personalities, they fit in space as well as they fit in the Old West.
That's exactly where I was going to go with it. And then with the frontier aspect comes the frontier justice. You had the idea that the West back in the day was just too big to police, which is why you had so many instances of outlaws and lone renegade lawmen patrolling the prairies, trying to mete out justice when and where they could. It's the whole reason we have a circuit court in this country, is because judges used to ride on horseback on a circuit to hear cases all through the West. And we just kept the term when we got cars and trucks and planes. So, and then the idea of the, I don't know how this came about. Maybe Jesse can help with this, because there were outlaws and there were lawmen, but then you had that kind of in the middle guy who was like the anti-hero. And this is your main trope character for these space Western shows. Captain Mal is a perfect example. Another good one. And I know it's not science fiction and he is a lawman, but Raylan Gibbons from Justified fits that same trope because he doesn't follow the rules. He does it his own way. He does his own version of justice. You can look at Jace from the Renegade Star series by J.N. Chaney as a classic Captain Mal renegade type character who has a code, but he's still on the wrong side of the law a lot of the time. So that's an essential, I think.
Yeah, well, it goes back to Star Trek, space, the final frontier. We're going to go and explore, and we're going to subdue it, and we're going to see what's out there, and we're going to pave the way for others to come out and do the same thing. And we'll find out, is there life out there, and can we get along with it? Do we have sex with it? Do we shoot it? What's going to happen? And we saw that in the Wild West.
Yeah,
again, it's that same kind of thing. And so it's really fun to take those same personalities and then put them up against that. And it also opens this path to take that frontier justice and that frontier ideal, but also put it up against hyper technology. Because going back to Captain Mal, it is hysterical to see them flying around with a ship full of cows. Because I grew up running cows, so I can tell you what that ship smelled like, and it was not good. But it's that juxtaposition of the shuttles and all those things, and yet we also have that very frontier kind of thing, and that's a fun thing to put together, to say you've got both of those things going on at the same time. An air car and horses, it's fun.
I can one up your cow smell. I roomed with a hockey player in college. Oh my goodness! With that out of the way, one of the things I think the West gave us, it was that escape valve for society. So for all the discontented types, I'm just going to take my ball and go home, go West, young man, whatever. And then once the West was settled, there was nothing. Space kind of gives you that frontier again. It gives you the chance to do it. I think space Western worked because at first it is going to be a little bit primitive as you're establishing society on alien planets. Just because the resupply time, you kind of have to start and then build. I don't think it'll take hundreds of years to get fully modernized, but I mean, it's the first couple years. Clearly, it's going to be Little House on the Prairie in space. So right. I think that's why it works.
And then, some of the more developed planets that had been colonized sooner had like you could see the line where the old town had been built before, but then there were like prefab structures and storage facilities that were turned into housing units, kind of like people do with cargo containers, but to Jenna's point, I had a question for you. I know that Roddenberry sold Star Trek as Wagon Train to the Stars. I get that. That was his pitch. Do you think he oversold that aspect of it? Because I've always viewed Star Trek as more of a space Navy show than a Wagon Train to the Stars. It was just too clean for me to think Western when I saw it. And I know I grew up on the old series.
More like that.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too, is that Battlestar delivered on that promise more, I think, than Trek did. And especially when you get into the Next Generation, which is like a love boat in space. Come on. But it was.
Well, but you still had Roddenberry was selling that, again, those personalities. Captain Kirk is that, that hero that comes in and he saves the day and he does that. So it was the shinier, cleaner side of it. Versus the Western that's the more grim. I mean, you could break up fantasy this way too, between your grim dark and your high fantasy kind of thing. It's kind of that same thing. You can kind of break up space Westerns with a lot of the exploratory ones, some of the colonization ships and things like that, where it is a cleaner, it's focused on the tech and that kind of thing, but it's still that wandering spirit, that going out and conquering what's out there. And then you get the others that really take on that gritty reality of breaking away from government, like you get in the brown coats, or that have the Battlestar thing where it is you have no homes, so your Western is going to find one. So I think there's a really nice spectrum that you can play with, but it all embraces those ideas of going out and beyond and what that means. All right, J.R. Wise hasn't said anything yet, and I think he should.
Yeah. I mean, kind of building on everything you guys have said. Well, actually, I want to roll back to what you said about whether we have sex with it or shoot it. Marines are going to do both. But and the order is questionable. But
you can say he gets a ticket back.
Oh my God.
He's going to take my job.
I think there's something romantic about the space Western, and more, and not like necessarily from like a love story kind of way, but more in like the 19th century sense of the word of it's this grand adventure where you go out and you're doing all these things like you guys said, like you're exploring the new stuff, you're staking your own claim, you're getting away from government. But I think the really interesting thing about the space Western as opposed to traditional Westerns is here will never end. There's always more.
Yes, that is the endless nature of it is what's appealing, and so you end up with that nomadic spirit always having further to go. And that's one of the tropes you see in space Westerns, where they're on the fringes of the galaxy, so to speak, and then modernity keeps encroaching, so they keep going further and further out to get away from the Empire, the Galactic Republic, whatever. I think that those kind of, Nick, you put it in the side comment, but the tropes for the Wild West stories are basically what you're using in space. So, and one thing the Westerns gave you, if you go back to Louis L'Amour, if you go back to the spaghetti Westerns, is the clear delineation between good and evil. But also you did have ambiguous characters that were kind of sometimes your friend and sometimes not. The bar drunk who sometimes helped you and sometimes stabbed you in the back. But there was also the good was the good and the bad was the bad. And, you judged harshly those that tried to walk that line. And so I think that is something modern relativism has lost. I think that's what makes space Westerns appealing, is because you do take those positions. Like, yeah, sometimes killing that guy is just wrong. Or sometimes he had it coming and he needed to die, and there are clear-cut answers and there's no gray area.
He just needed killing.
In the South, homicide.
That's what I loved about Firefly, was because it had all of those characters were in the same crew. I mean, you had Jane, who was obviously the amoral type, would pretty much do anything for money. We'd already seen where he'd betrayed people for cash and then switched sides. And then we've got Shepard, the guy who's now a preacher who definitely has a dark past. It was like,
he was definitely an operative.
Oh yeah, what was that line though? Where it's like the Bible's a little fuzzier on kneecaps.
Kneecaps.
That was great. It's one of my favorite lines out of the whole show.
Shepherd Book was a baller, bro.
He really was. But then you got Wash, who's just a comic relief flyboy.
So
go ahead.
Can we just throw out there that it does not count if he's betraying them and they fought for the Alliance during the Unification War, because they had it coming, really.
Oh, yeah.
I could agree with that.
It doesn't count.
On the losing side. Not so convinced it was the wrong side.
Right, but I'm just saying, I do think Mal, he wasn't amoral. I think he had a moral code. It just wasn't everybody else's. At the end of the day,
Mal had his own code. Jane didn't, but Mal did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane's code was his bunk. All right.
Yeah, and he's always in it.
And Vera. Don't forget Vera.
Vera was very important.
So, but yeah, I like the idea that you do have those defined roles, those archetypes, the white hat, the black hat, the good guys, the bad guys. Now, one of the tropes that you see in a lot of Westerns was, the untamed savage in the form of, on the Westerns, of the Indians, for good or ill of the genre. Sometimes in space, you see that, be it with those people fighting for independence on the alien planets, humans, but that are fighting against the establishment, if you would. And sometimes those untamed savages are the aliens. Do you guys have a preference if that is human on human versus human on Xeno?
I don't have a preference, but I feel like it's important for all the questions that we've asked to recognize that, I push towards character-driven fiction, right? Like your fiction should be character-based, and then what the characters are supposed to do is what they do, what they would do according to the character that you built. But that matches real life, and it matches real life for this subject too. There's a great book that I've talked about before called Empire of the Summer Moon, and it's all about the rise and fall of the Comanche Empire. And to the Comanche, when they were waging war was total. It had no rules. And it wasn't wrong if you raided another tribe to do terrible, unspeakable things to them. That was just war. That was what a raid was. It was like looking at somebody weird for making a sandwich with mayonnaise. It's what you do. And that was because of the different cultures on the more European side. Some of the things that they did that they saw as just war, we would see as war crime. Now, you can argue the semantics of it all day, but if you run into a alien species or a species that you have never encountered or mixed with before, they may have these really strange customs. And if humanity separates itself by 10,000 years in different directions, then meets again, you're going to have weird and strange customs between them too. And that's another reason why it all mixes together so well, is when you put people out in space, you have that vast difference in culture as well.
Okay, so Nick brought this up in the side comments. We're going to derail for just a minute. It's all Nick's fault if you're listening, Stabby. But, all right, are you Team Mayo or Team Miracle Whip?
Oh, it's Team Mayo.
Miracle Whip all the way, man.
I'm about to eat. Oh, no, that's fight on sight, JR. That's fight on sight. You can catch these hands. And they rated E for everybody.
Michael, you want to weigh in on this very important question?
I grew up on Miracle Whip. So when my wife and I got together, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what mayonnaise was really. And so then my wife was like a mayonnaise girl. And so now I do mayonnaise because I'm keeping the peace. So,
Oh, no, delicious food to save your planet. Oh, my God.
JR, do you have a strong opinion on this one?
I'm more of a mayo guy, but usually only if I'm using it as a base to make a whole nother sauce. I don't ever put just mayonnaise on something or Miracle Whip.
Okay. Jana, you've got to come out on the right side of this. Come on.
I'm with JR. It comes down to JR's that. Let's see which direction. That way. It comes down to using it for other stuff. And so where I need something with a sweeter base, then the Miracle Whip is going to pull that through. And where I need something with a plainer base, then you reach for the mayos. So totally depends on the dish. They both have their place.
As they say down here in the South, you wanted to have a little wang, you use a Miracle Whip.
So dear listener, you can join us in the comments and weigh in and tell Nick why he's wrong and Miracle Whip is not the superior product. Or you can tell me I'm wrong, and I will delete the comments. I'll delete the comments. It's cool if you tell me I'm wrong.
Did Jesse get to weigh in? Hey, did the outlaw get to weigh in?
I don't think he did.
He was talking pretty slow.
I don't do either, honestly. I'm a meat, cheese, and bread kind of guy.
So speaking of food, we're gonna turn this back to space westerns. One of the things that you see in the westerns is they're very hearty fare, but it wasn't fancy, right? Do you think you see that a lot in space westerns? I've noticed the trend where it's a lot of protein bars and like prototypical field food, even though they're on the planet. Or do you prefer like more established cultures where they're actually eating real food? I mean, they're both different atmospheres, different aesthetics. So do you guys have a preference?
I stole the idea of the Star Trek replicator for Galaxy's Most Wanted, because that was the one thing from the show that I thought was the coolest thing ever. You just tell it what you want and it gives it to you. But then I turned it into a running gag across 4 books that my main character couldn't figure it out. And whenever he asked for whatever food it was, it always gave him this blue glop that tasted vaguely like grits sweetened with sugar. And so 4 books, he lived with that. Oh yes, I borrowed that. Yes, I didn't steal it. Anyway, but no, I liked about some of these shows like Firefly. What did Shepherd Book pay his way onto the ship with? Anybody remember?
Strawberries.
A big giant strawberry that he gave to Kaylee that she relished later. And so I think, it's very realistic to me as we spread out that a lot of our food is going to be rations. It's going to be like MREs or ration bars and stuff like that until we get to a point where we can grow our own. And that's going to be problematic on a lot of planets because the soil nutrients are going to be different. There's going to be different kinds of breakdowns of stuff, and you may not be able to grow certain crops. So you may not be able to grow wheat. You may have to find something else to make your bread out of. And so, that'd be a fun thing to kind of play with.
To that planet.
Right.
Or you could build a greenhouse, but then you got to import the dirt and then you got to fertilize it.
And you got to science the shit out of it.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Damon approved.
Basically, I guess you could transfer your entire hydroponic section from the ship that got you there to the surface of the planet and make that the basis for your farming, I guess. If your ship is like a one-way trip kind of a ship, like a generation ship or something.
Yeah, but a lot of food comes down to you have to look at nutritional value. You have to look at how fast it can be produced, how easily can it be hauled around. And when you're talking about first settling, those are the things that matter. And I mean, even going back to Firefly, there's the very first episode where he tosses her an energy bar because something that's very nutrient dense when you're first trying to settle, when you're trying to make something happen, that's a big deal. Fancy food is a matter of leisure. It marks you socially as having a social structure where there is the leisure that you can hire somebody who can take all day to bake you something that is magnificent. I mean, I can put together a multi-layer wedding cake, but I can't do it on the spot. I have to have the time for it. I have to have the right kind of ingredients. And if it's going to be really fine flours, that all requires a very different social structure, requires a different kind of kitchen. It's a very different thing. So there's a whole lot to being able to say, where are you on the social strata and where are you on the technological strata to be able to make those kinds of foods. So there's a lot that goes into that. And then you get into the alien foods of what's the crossover there of, here's this thing that to us is a delicacy. And you look at it and go, oh no, man, that thing is still moving. I'm not touching it. So food in these is lots of fun because you do have that crossover. And also, will it kill me if I eat it? Because for all that humans are fairly hardy, we do have some pretty decent restrictions that say, if we eat these certain things, we will die because our bodies can't take it. So you have to think about all these different things when you're going into where your space western is and where's your technology level.
So are there any subgenres that you think blend well with a space western sort of vibe? I'm thinking First Contact works for that. But are there any others that you guys can think of that would pair very well with, like cornbread and chili?
I think unintentionally, the original Lost in Space which was supposed to be like a Swiss Family Robinson in space. But I think they unintentionally hit on some of the space Western tropes, even though they were living the stranded on a desert island or desert planet kind of a life. They still had to deal with frontiersy things like aliens showing up and critters that they had to deal with and stuff like that. You know, they didn't have personnel. A whole huge tech base. Was that
indigenous personnel?
Yeah, indigenous folks. Indigs.
Chiefs.
Yeah, that's it. And I think what was that one show? Dude, I always blank on the name. Farscape. That's it. Farscape had a lot of the Western tropes in it too, and it also had that really cool fish out of water thing because he was the only Earth guy, you know. Mm-hmm. And if we're gonna go way back into Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine, let's go to Battle Beyond the Stars because that had an actual space cowboy in it. George Papard from the A-Team had a CB in his hand. Oh, space cowboy from Earth. I was like, get out of here. That was great. So that was the first experience I had with somebody being a space cowboy. So that was pretty dope.
Yeah.
I think the wagon train and the cattle drive work really well when it comes to, because like we were just talking about food, the only space Western I have down on theoretical paper in a Word doc is a cattle drive. And it's a whole prairie planet that's dedicated to feeding all the other planets around it with beef. And that's the whole planet's job, is to take care of that for the system around it. And the wagon train is the fleet. And the fleet is out there on its own, either as a generational ship or an exploration or whatever. And they have all those same problems. If they run into hostile aliens, it's circle the wagons and figure it out. If they run into, strange weather or, solar storms or anything like that, it's just like being stuck in a blizzard in the middle of Oklahoma.
So that's one of the things that you see in Space Western is the role of the elements in the story, right? Because in the West, if you don't have everything established yet, you are sort of at the mercy of the weather. Do you think you need that for it to be a Space Western? Or because, one of the things you can see in space is everything is like the habitats are so contained that you're kind of cut off from that. Do you have a preference in the sort of the more space vibe aesthetic to living, or do you prefer like to actually look almost like the West in space where you even got the saloons and the doors?
I prefer that, where you start off with the camps and then it kind of turns into a boom town. They find a precious metal, silver, gold, whatever, the lithium, and what sci-fi you're getting into. I like the frontier aspect. I like when they start like you're playing a game of Age of Civilizations or Age of Empires, where you got nothing. You came out here with what you carried with you, and now you got to build stuff. You got to figure out what you can eat, what you can't eat. What animals are here are good. Are they pack animals? Are they herd animals? I mean, can I domesticate them? Whatever. I think those are important aspects because it dives into the core trope of that frontier, the Wild West. And then obviously some towns are going to get a little bit bigger. They draw in more people or whatever, and they bring in more resources, revenue or whatever. And so you get these saloons and you get racetracks and you get all these other things, and then they start competing against each other because that's what humans do.
When you
I took it further. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jenna. I'll go after you.
I took it further than that. So I wrote a space Western romance, which was a whole lot of fun. But because you've got technology, if you've got whatever it takes to travel fast enough that these can theoretically talk to each other. So hyperdrives, faster than light, whatever it is. Because otherwise, your space Westerns really are, you go out there and it's a long, long time to go out there. And then what's going to happen is probably going to happen on that planet because you're not getting resupplies from Earth or whatever. So once you figure out your travel, that's going to change a lot of it too. And so where I was on the planet, the area around the space dock, that's where the technology is. That's where they built a much more modern kind of city. But there's a whole planet to go explore. So as you get further away from that, You have certain things that came with them, their churches and that kind of thing. But then they have ranches. They have people that are going out to the mountains. They're doing all of those traditional Western things. But right around that city, because you're going to have spaceports if you're doing this, and you're going to have their whole thing was that 3 months out of the year, we're cut off from the space dock. We can't get to the other planet where we ship our harvest out. So it was really important. You had to hit all of the harvest, all of the everything else, and you had to be able to take advantage of those windows. But that's where the technology was. And then the real Western is as you get away from that center, because those centers can be resupplied if you've got the ability for the travel.
You just described the river and the railroad towns from the West, like the river port towns.
It's exactly that.
It's where everything grew out of. And then you had the rural areas and then the frontier areas. So yeah, it's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think JR had something a minute ago.
So one of the tropes that you see, and if you want, we will link to her book in the show notes. I'll get her to get me that link, the universal link for the smoochy, if that's for you. But one of the universal
there's a lot of Firefly to it. There are people that shoot each other in the face. Lots of that kind of stuff. There just also happens to be a fairly
you get smoochy and the pew-pews. You know, it's peanut butter and jelly. Put your hands together, my man.
You put it together, and it's a happy thing.
Yeah, specifically, you got to shoot him in the face, Jesse. You're on target. That is the.
If you aim well enough, they go down and they stay down.
The Dalai Lama taught me many things. 2 in the chest, face gets the rest. But the one of the things you see a lot of in the original Westerns is you had a lot of combat veterans. So a lot of the Western stories take place after the Civil War. And so you get a lot of, disgruntled, like the outlaw Josie Wales, for instance, disgruntled veterans on both sides. You see that in Mal Reynolds with Serenity and Firefly as well. But do you think that post-war period is required to sell the space Western? Or do you think that's sort of like the peanut butter with the chocolate? It's just nice to have.
I don't think it's required,
helps,
but I think it makes it more interesting. Because I think that military sci-fi or military anything goes really well with the space Western. Because military operations, especially out on kind of, middle of nowhere places, start to resemble something looking like the Wild West. I mean, like, when you guys were in Iraq and Afghanistan out in the middle of nowhere, like we were out next to the Pakistani border, crapping in bags and sleeping in mud huts. So that kind of lends itself to the space Western. And, the Galaxy's Edge series, I feel like has some space Western vibes, honestly. Especially with like Kublar and I actually really like the Koobs because they're not just like this homogenous like bad guy. Later in the series you get Pikak and the really nice Koobs who are fighting on the same side as the Lieges, and so it's you get this really,
and they're very tribal.
Yeah.
So
and I realized that wasn't really necessarily going for a Western vibe. It was more of a Middle Eastern kind of thing, but a lot of the same tropes, a lot of the same characters.
It's a lot of crossover with those tropes. Native American tribes are very similar to Arabic tribes and wandering Bedouins. And, you had all of that in the Galaxy's Edge series and in several others. There's some aspects of that in the Renegade Star series as it goes. I mean, the 16-book series, he covers a lot of ground.
In the bobblehead.
Yeah. So
I just want you to know that.
What?
I was just going to tell the dear listener, I did not pay him to pimp the series I've written in. I just want you to know that he did that on his own accord. There's no paying involved.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot you did a little thing in there. But another aspect of it, though, I think that maybe we haven't touched on yet. We did a little bit, but the predators, the critters that are out there, that can take the form of aliens, but it can also... Yeah, they're alien animals, but you can have your hyper dire wolf analog or your noble savage analog or your Gorn analogs, all of these things that we find in like Star Trek. And somebody mentioned earlier about some of the villains of the piece could be aliens, and they represent that noble savage. And I think for Star Trek, that was the Romulans. because they were offshoots of the Vulcans. They diverged as separate species, and the Vulcans embraced logic, the Romulans embraced emotion, and it was a really cool contrast, I thought. And then, of course, there's everybody's favorite wild men, the Andorians. So they're those guys you do not cross ever.
Were those the blue ones with the little antennae?
Yep, that's them. Hyper violent.
Yeah, they were my favorite. The most overrated warrior race, though, also came from Star Trek in the form of the Klingons. I mean, like, they're supposed to be this big
been cool, man.
They were supposed to be this big bad alien race, and then every time they boarded, that little blonde chick that was the original TNG Star Trek The Next she was the original security person, and she's like throwing them around at like 5'0". I'm like, how are they galactic badasses and they can't even handle this little squeak of a woman? Like, no, they were a joke.
Can't even beat a woman.
They were like the Timu or the Wish version of a warrior race.
Have you seen that cartoon where you got the classic Star Trek Klingons with the smooth heads sitting in 10 forward with all the new Klingons with the tortoiseshell heads? And they're kind of like
the predator heads.
The funny one was when they did the time travel episode, and the Worf was like, "We do not talk about them." And they kind of gave a reason for the change, which I thought was kind of cool. Like, it was a virus that affected them that, took generations to fix.
Right.
I like it when they nod to the lore of the past, and when you can do better because of technology, you kind of address that. I thought that was kind of cool, like, nod to the fans. I really dug that.
Well, because they'd been asking about it for years. What happened with these guys? Finally, somebody at Paramount said, "Okay, we got to do an episode about this. This is getting out of control.
Gotta fix it."
So Jena did mention one of the things is the angle where the space western meets very nicely is the romance genre, because I mean, western and romance go together very well. Space western and romance, I mean, they're very popular setting for that too. So we're going to ask you this one, Jana. What is it about that setting that you think makes it ideal, what you see for the romance side of the house? Because you write those.
Well, because with the westerns, you're going out there and you've got to create a family eventually, or else you're going to die out. So there's automatically reasons for, because that's like the mail order brides and things like that are a very traditional, very, very popular romance genre. Is these guys out in the West that they've got a homestead to run. Sometimes they've got kids there. They've got that kind of stuff, and they need a wife. And there's not enough of them. And so they send in the catalog for a bride to come out in order to make this happen. So you get that, and can this person, this cute little woman who's coming from the coast, deal with this rugged Western guy? And so it's taming the frontier, but it's also taming him. It's finding love. It's all those kinds of things. It's the prostitute with the heart of gold, which speaks to Inara, and that whole setup there that there were women out there to provide for men's needs, as the saying goes. And there's a romance to be talked about there as well. There's the protective nature that you very often get with that Western hero kind of archetype. And it's giving him someone to protect, but also you pick up characters like Wash and Zoe, where she was also protecting him. And so you can do so many interesting things with the romance. I mean, Wash and Zoe is a fascinating example because, she's the kick-ass, but he's still the husband of the family. And there's still that really interesting marital dynamic that goes there. And that's this great romance that we see playing out, even though they're already together. We get to keep seeing, how does that go? They talk about kids. They talk about jealousy. They talk about all of those things. And human relationships is part of what makes stories interesting, whether it's friendships, romances, or romance. However that works, it's part of what makes the characters real to us, is that they're connected to other people. So the romance genre works so well with other genres because we're looking for where's those relationships and those connections. And in this kind of thing, you've got to have both pieces, or your frontier is going to die. That there's no way to settle and stay that way unless you've got all of those pieces together.
I think romanticization of both of these spaces is also really important, and that ties into Jena with the romance itself, along with the whole frontier aspect of it. There were people that stood at one point at the edge of the Mississippi and gazed over it and said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find what's out there one day. And there are people that stare up at the stars and say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find what's out there one day. And even when we were doing that, already people were already romanticizing the stories that go out there. Most people, if you're a Western fan, you know The Searchers. It's a classic John Wayne movie. It's one of those Westerns everybody knows. The real story of The Searchers is incredibly dark. It does not end happily for almost anyone. It is that whole family, the whole Parker family, almost suffers tragedy. But even during the time that they were alive, and the real version of John Wayne's character is searching for Cynthia Ann Parker, they were already writing romanticization. God, I can't talk. You get what I mean. They were already writing nonsense about what was happening. Like the news articles don't reflect that at times. The Wild West era tells stories about itself. And when you have that open space, space will do the same thing. People will tell stories about space while they are going into space. It's going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I do wonder, though, if some of those tropes like the mail order bride would work in a space Western, because modern sensibilities on the roles of the genders, that they might protest a book like that.
Maybe, because the traditional mail order brides is still a phenomenally hot genre, regardless of what people think about that. And they just kind of blow it off and say it still works. You have to have the reason for it. And space romance, alien romances and that kind of stuff are huge. And one of the subgenres there is alien world that requires women, and women who sign up to go be mail order brides, who shine it. It's a hot genre that already exists in this idea. And those aren't all necessarily space Westerns, but science fiction romance already does the mail order bride thing. And people do not balk at it, because it's just part of it's one of the subgenres that works. In mine, it's she owns the ranch and he's a technologist that comes from the core worlds and is coming to come and fix misters and stuff that she's got there. And so it's a changed dynamic, but he's still the hero, but he gets brought to her. And again, I don't have anybody who balks that. He came to do a job and then he found out he was in love with the wrong woman. And so it's kind of a fun, it's still those same tropes, but in that setting. But yeah, mail order bride is not a problem in science fiction romance.
Is there anything in the space Western field that if you see that in the novel, in the show, whatever, that instantly pulls you out? Is there the one thing that's a bridge too far for people? Too primitive or too advanced, or what have you?
I have a hard time with hard science in a space Western. I was gonna mention this earlier. When you do the biodome, right? When you do the very early stages of colonization, from what my frankly not super scientific mind will envisions it as, lots of just struggling to have the basics. And eventually you build up this one spot on the planet where people don't die if they don't wear a helmet. That lends itself deeply to cyberpunk. It lends itself deeply to grimdark tropes, to really hard tropes, like things that end up being much more from a kind of a different genre. And don't get me wrong, Westerns can get very dark. Westerns can get very the struggle and morality of man kind of deal, but they address it in a different manner, and they address loneliness and things like that in a different manner. And things like noir fit that much more. They fit in that initial science stage much more. The Western just fits in easier when you have the space and you don't have to worry about all that. So the only thing that messes me up is when if we had a space Western, we were so worried about the science of it, we forgot the Western.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Is there anything else that yanks people out when they're reading space westerns?
Well, like I said, like if it's too clean, like that's what did it for Star Trek for me. Was it is just too freaking clean, and I know it had the spirit of the frontier. I get that, but it was too freaking clean. It was just everything was spotless. There was, nobody had to step and slip in a pile of crap and clean it off their boot before they walked inside. And that was something that, Firefly and some other shows, I think, did a lot better as far as that goes, as far as the, like the whole colonization thing, like Jesse was saying. And if you pick a planet that you can't farm, you're losing a lot of the frontier Western aspect of it right there. If all your farming has to be done in a dome, it doesn't have that same flavor. It's more of a Stanley Kubrick than a Louis L'Amour kind of a setup, I guess. Oh.
Okay. I know for me, I think one of the things that, because of, certain age people, I grew up playing Oregon Trail as part of the kind of de facto requirement for middle school history. So I died of dysentery, got shot by Indians, fell and drowned in the river, all the things, right? So for me, snakes, yeah. And the hunting scenes were always fun. I was never that great of a shot in the game. For some reason, I always misfired. I don't know why. I did all the times it told me to hit the button to clean your weapon. Anyway, I'm not bitter.
Nick said you did in Iraq too, so
Well, I hit what I was aiming at. So all good. But yeah, so one of the things for me, like that, I think when I think space westerns, is you think about that experience where you're cut off from supplies. So the diseases that if you're back in the East Coast, yeah, you could get treated for that, you'll be good to go. But in the West, you don't have ready access to the supplies, might be more dangerous. I think that you can push that forward into space because, the distance for resupply is no longer months. It could be years depending on travel technology. So for me, I like to see some of the grittiness and the sickness too, because for some people, if we're in space, we've gotten rid of all illnesses. Well, maybe not. And then there's always the new illnesses that we're not ready for yet, right? Like when you land in new places. So before we wrap this up, you've been a little bit quiet today, JR, and I don't know if anyone named JR is allowed to be that quiet, so we got to work on this. But any closing thoughts from you?
The thing I was going to add to that was I think the characters in a space western are very important, and I think a large portion of the cast, especially the supporting cast, should just be regular people. If everybody's an engineer or a scientist or an artist or something that's realistically not super necessary in a frontier setting, it's no longer a space western, because it really should be about regular people trying to survive.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Well said.
Mic drop.
All right. With that, we're going to give everyone a chance to talk about what they're writing now and then how they can find them. We're going to go around robin, all Brady Bunch style. We're going to start with you, Mr. Jesse James Fain, outlaw author himself.
Hopefully, by the time this comes out, I will actually have my Space Western out on Substack. So you can go check it out. You can read it there. I'm going to release it for free. So you can go check that out. It's called Auric High. It's got a lot of cool Lord of the Rings jokes mixed in with my Space Western. Other than that, I will be working on various shorts and working on building my Holy Diver in the Midnight Scene universe. You can find me at outlawauthor.com. You can find me on Instagram at Jesse James Books. You can find me on Instagram is at Jesse James Fain. X/Twitter is at Jesse James Books. Find me on Substack, Outlaw Author, and that's pretty much it. You can find me on Facebook if you really want to, but as I always say, that's my personal page. Lots of guns, tattoos, heavy metal, stuff like that. And all my writing stuff, of course, too.
All right. And just for the record, for everyone listening at home, yes, we're airing this in the middle of January. So this is season 5. Woo! But we're recording it as we're thawing our turkeys for Turkey Day in November. So with that, Jana, what is future you going to be writing? Woo! And then
First of all, more important than the turkey is. The turkey has to be really, really good, mind you, but it's pie week, and pie week is phenomenally important. Just ask my kids, because I have a list already of the requests, all the different flavors that they're hoping for.
How many pies will you be making?
Last year I made 22. I think this year we'll be down to 18 because a couple of the folks who usually eat with us will not be there.
Fair enough.
But my max that I did in 1 year was 37. And that was when the whole extended family got together. So we had 37 pies for about 80 people. So you got almost a half pie a piece. It's nice. A little over a half pie. Anyway, so pie week. I love pie week. But I am currently, by January, I will hopefully have the urban fantasy that I'm working on done. And the one that's got to follow that will probably be in the shoot. So I'll be working on urban fantasy. I desperately need to write the second book in the Desert Rain series. So I've got to get to work on that. And that'll be, back to space Western. And I have a couple of other things that are coming up. I do have a science fiction romance that is coming up. And what else do I have? The list is long and large, and it will be fun. And you can find me at opalkingdompress.com or all over the internet under Jena Rey, under Jadlyn Asher, or under Jana S Brown. I'm generally the only one of my stripe.
All right. Next, we have Mr. J.R. Wise.
I'm working on book 2 of my series, the Terra Ascending series. I'm working on a couple things with Canon Publishing. I've got a short story coming out in an anthology of theirs in their Fallen Empire universe. The 2 characters are based on me and my old platoon sergeant, and it's mostly about what a pain in the ass I was for my platoon sergeant.
You too?
Yeah. I was the best and worst squad leader he ever had, is what he told me. The guys over at Canon liked it enough that they want me to do a novel about those 2 characters, so I'm also working on that. And then I have a deep desire to write a story about a gun-toting Santa fighting ice giants that maybe I'll do for next Christmas.
Ironically, we're going to be putting out another Santa as Badass anthology.
Ooh.
Yep. Jared wants it.
Well, mostly Nick and I wanted to continue the story of feral elves stabbing people with candy canes.
Also good.
We've actually recently, we're recording this, like I said, right before Turkey Day. We've actually contracted the author. I've looked at his work. He's badass. His stuff is good. We got recommended by him by JT Railgun, however you say his name. I butcher it when he's here too, people.
That is now officially his name moving forward.
Yeah,
Railgun.
Right, but he recommended this guy, so I checked it out, and it's good stuff. So we're in the process of setting up payment, and it's amazing work. I'm kind of excited. After we die from a turkey coma, Nick and I will be coordinating our outline too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we get. So, all right, that's an excellent idea. We commend you for wanting to turn Santa into a badass. And so, did you give your platoon sergeant any extra gray hairs?
Oh, like when I was there, or while I've been writing this, because I let him read it.
I don't know why you were there.
Oh my God. So when I switched over, so this was my platoon sergeant when I was in the Army. And when I switched over from the Marine Corps to the Army, one, that was a hell of a culture shock. I did not realize how different it was going to be. But I found out about this thing called the Army Service Ribbon, which is like this little rainbow ribbon. And apparently you get it just for finishing your MOS school, which is...
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on what I think of that. But you also get it for 4 months of active duty. And I was really bored on our last deployment, so I typed up a memo about awarding myself the Army Service Ribbon, even though I didn't give a crap if I got it. And I printed out 500 copies and taped them up all over his office. And I would hide it in emails to him. I would slip it under his door in his barracks room. Like, I just for months harassed him with this because I needed something to do other than torture my Joes. But and then eventually they were giving out awards to the company, and they call me up and they give me an Army Achievement Medal for, I shit you not, maxing the PT test and shooting expert on the range. I feel like that should just be an expectation, but okay. And then the battalion sergeant major calls me back up in front, and I see he's got this one of the little award boxes in it. And as I'm running it up, I see that little rainbow ribbon. And I was like, "You motherfuckers!" And I just say that without in the middle of this battalion formation, and I was like, and then they blood penned the Army service ribbon on me right there in formation.
Oh,
So he got me back pretty good. And that was probably one of the more mild things I did to harass him. But
I laugh at the awards because a lot of times it's just, did you have the right rank at the right time to get the award? And because they gave all the Bronze Stars to the staff sergeants and above that never left Kuwait, but somehow they got Bronze Stars.
I was a staff sergeant. I didn't get a Bronze Star.
But you pissed in the captain's Wheaties, so I mean, come on. What did you expect?
It was just Camelback. It's different. And every time we came in after patrol, we ambushed them with airsoft guns.
Oh, I got a story for you. Hey.
But no, so when we had one guy that legitimately did some heroic, like we were under fire, he goes into a burning civilian truck. One of the TCNs were escorting, pulls the guy out, saves his life. They gave him an Army Achievement medal with the Army Service Ribbon, the rainbow one, with V for Valor device. And I remember when we presented it to him in a formation, my platoon sergeant was like, "You need to keep this printout of this ribbon because people are going to accuse you of stolen valor for wearing that V because no one's going to ever believe this shit show." And so we like, you know, you can print the orders and then shrink it and then laminate it for his dress uniform pocket because no one was ever going to believe the Army Service Ribbon with V for Valor for heroism under fire. Like, it's just
outstanding.
I mean, at this point, I almost don't want them to upgrade it because the story is so cool as it is, right? Like, he could, I shit you not, there I was to his grandkids someday about the Army Service Ribbon that he got for Valor. But if they like make it as, I don't know, something cool, then the story loses a little bit of that gravitas. Anyway. All right. So your story, Michael, and then you can tell us what you're writing and how they can find you.
I don't know. The story may need to do this off air.
I mean, you already teased us a little bit. We're an hour.
Everybody remembers. All of us dog faces remember. I don't know. Maybe you guys didn't do this. Did you guys do stand to every morning? Did you do that? Okay. So we did that too in Air Defense Artillery. And they made us all go dig our shallow graves. Sorry, IFPs. And have those set up. And I did mine friggin' textbook, man. It was the exact dimensions, had the aiming stakes, had the grenade sump, everything. And so first couple of mornings on stand 2, which for the uninitiated, you get up 30 minutes before the sun, you get in your position and you stay there till 30 minutes. After the sun comes up, then you go to chow, which to me, if I was the enemy, I would just attack while everybody's in the chow line, but that's just me.
They did in Missoula. I was there.
Yeah, there you go. So, and I had my little IFP and I was very proud of it. I go out there 2 mornings later and there's this guy, we called him the Troll. I don't even remember his real name. We just called him the Troll because he looked like a troll. And he was in my IFP. And we got into this big argument about get out of my IFP. No, I'm not getting his mine. I dug this. No, you didn't. You can't dig anything to standard. Get out of my IFP. Long story short, instead of getting into a fight and getting, busted because my unit did have MPs, I just gave up on it and I'm fuming. Man, I go back to the tent and I'm pissed. And I'm sure you guys remember the water bottles that you would gradually refill later after the water's processed. Okay. So I started collecting those and I'd go out on my guard shift late at night and I just poured them all over this IFP. And by the next morning, it had all evaporated except for the smell. And the Troll would go out and lay down in that IFP. And then like 4 or 5 days later, Sergeant First Class Waldrip, the drip god almighty, called him in front of the entire platoon and ordered him to go take a shower because, boy, you smell like piss. So that's how I got revenge. And my Sergeant Porter comes up to me and puts his arm around me. He's like, well, boys, when you got here, I thought you was going to be in trouble, but you're going to be all right.
All right. So what are you writing at the moment, LaVoice? And then how can listeners and viewers find you? And then we got to circle back to JR.
Okay. Right now I'm working with Peter Stanley on the SARCOM series book 1. We should hopefully have those, the first one finished here in the next month or so. Gladius League's book 1 should be released and in the wild by the time this airs. By the time this podcast releases, we're hoping for a January release on that. I'm also I did some short stories for Henchman Press, the Tales of the E4 Mafia antho, and they also are coming out with the Tales of the Butter Bar antho and Tales of the E4 Mafia Volume 2. And those stories collectively represent a group of characters I'm calling the Gearhead Gorillas, because they're a maintenance platoon that gets stranded behind enemy lines and become the greatest saboteurs of all space-time. Because of their knowledge of how to fix stuff, they use that to break stuff. And those stories will hopefully be plotted into a 3-novel arc, and I'll be writing that at the same time that we're working on Sarcom.
You really need to go like mine the Fat Electrician's stories that he does from military
already
history.
Done.
Because
Already done.
He's got one about the only Navy submarine that has a kill for a railroad because they were bored, so they just pulled up to shore and they just went and like ambushed a German.
Or the frigate that parked itself on top of a German U-boat.
Yeah, there's lots of good content in there that could make stories for you for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And as we learned from the Fat Electrician, it's not a war crime the first time.
That's right.
Although
as to where they can find me, you can find me easily at michaellavoice.com. And aside from that, all my Twitters and X's and Substacks and all that, you can click on the link in the show notes for my link tree.
All right. And then JR, circling back to you, where can we find you on the wild interwebs? And as usual, all the links you need to stalk him, follow him, are in the show notes.
Yes, please stalk me. That way I can maybe sell a book.
Easy. Easy, cowboy.
I can see now someone breaks into your house and you're like, hold on, but can I tell you about my book, The Terra Ascending? And you've got him like tied to the chair.
Yeah, whatever works. I mean, and if I'm not here, I have a ferocious attack beagle, and my wife from New Jersey has gotten over her fear of guns and learned to shoot. So we're all good here.
Yay!
Yeah. But I have a very bare bones website, jrwise.com. Find me on Amazon. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram and Facebook. Usually go by the handle The Wise Author on all those platforms.
Okay. That means your logo is going to be like an owl, right?
Ooh, it could be.
Who?
All right. And so this is the friendly reminder, dear listener, where I remind you when you're reading the good books out there, please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, and it really does make a difference. And then as far as stalking people, following your friends. You can follow us on our link tree at linktr.ee linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only. Save the shenanigans from out of Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitters, and the emails. We have our website, bunch of gobbledygook. Don't hate me, hate Spotify. But when you click the link tree and go to our website, you can find that Spotify site and support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, and I don't even know how much it's going to cost next year because I haven't found the replacement for StreamYard yet. But every little penny helps. You can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they float away on a river of Java with a little bit of bourbon, because that's how we roll when Stabby's not here to tell us no. When the cat's away, the mice will play, or something. Responsible adults. Anyway, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for coming on, Jesse, Jana, JR, and Michael. We appreciate it. Nick, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate you too. I don't say that enough, so thank you. And with that, we're going to hit the end by and wait for it. Still cuss yet.